5 episodes ago, I asked you a question. Why does everything feel harder even when you are doing everything right? We spent 4 episodes answering it. The broken math, the culture it produced, the system behind it, the people who benefit when it says broken. Today is different. Today is not about what is wrong. Today is about what you do about it and what we do about it together. This is moral economy talk. We live in a time where people are working harder than ever and falling further behind, where families feel more pressure even when they're doing more right, where the gap between the effort and outcome has never been wider and nobody explains why. This podcast exists to close that gap, to take the intersection of money, family, and values and talk about it like adults, not with political spin, not with financial jargon designed to make you feel small. Just clear thinking from someone who has lived the pressure, done the work, and refuses to pretend the system is the same as it was. Because economics is not just the numbers on a government report. It is a dinner table argument you did not want to have. It is a 2 in the morning moment when you look at the ceiling and wonder if you made the right choices. It is exhaustion that has nothing to do with laziness. This is Moral Economy Talk, and I'm your host, Aleksandar Balta. Let's get into it. I want to start today by going back, not to recap, to remind you of the distance we have covered together. Because I think when you are inside a long journey, it is easy to forget how far you have come from where you started. We started with a feeling, that invisible weight that most people carry but struggle to name. The sense that you are doing everything you were told to do, working harder, trying to build responsible, trying to build something real. And the outcome does not match the effort. We named it. We said, this is not a personal failure. This is a system that changed while most people were not paying attention. Then we went into math, the housing ratio that went from 3 times income to 20 times in one generation. The grocery cart that costs 60% more than it did 4 years ago. The debt that became the entry fee to being an adult. The inflation that quietly transfers value from the people who earn wages to the people who own assets. The service fees that charge you for the privilege of being connected to infrastructure your taxes already paid for. We measured your rent in hours of your life, and a exact mechanism behind the pressure your body was already telling you was real. Then we followed that math into culture. We made the affirmative case for marriages not as a social convention, but as one of the strongest predictors of human happiness ever measured by science. 85 years of Harvard research pointed at the same answer. The quality of your close relationships is what determines the quality of your life. We talked about children not as a lifestyle choice, but as one of the deepest sources of human meaning available. We named the grief of wanting a family the math would not allow. We had the honest conversation about feminism and economics that most people avoid. The difference between women needing to work because one income stopped being enough and the cultural messaging that confused an entire generation about a life was supposed to look like. And then we followed it all the way to the source. We asked who actually writes the rules that produce these outcomes. We named the unelected monetary policymakers, the $4.2 billion lobbying machine, the revolving door between regulation and industry, the way both political parties have served the same interests while keeping working people divided and exhausted and focused on fighting each other instead of the system producing the conditions that are squeezing all of them equally. That was 4 episodes of honest, difficult, and specific diagnosis. Episode 5. This episode is the response, not a political program, not a 5-step financial plan, not a promise that the system will fix itself if you vote for the right person. The honest response, the one that takes everything we have learned over 4 episodes and asks, given all of this, given the broken math, the cultural consequences, the system behind it, the people who benefit from its staying broken, what does the personal values actually do? What do we do together? What is worth fighting for? And how do we fight for it? That is what this episode is about. And I want to start with the most important thing I know. Think about the people who came before you, not the famous ones, not the ones who got their names on the buildings or stories in textbooks, the ordinary ones, the great grandparent who came off a boat with everything they owned in one bag and built a life in a country whose language they did not speak, where the systems and institutions were not designed to help them, in many cases, were actually hostile to them. The coal miner who went underground every day in conditions that would be illegal today, who organized with people around him to demand something better, who built Union Hall and a community center and a credit union out of the simple collective conviction that if the system was not going to protect them, they would build something that would. The family that survived the Great Depression with nothing and still put a food on a neighbor's table because that is what you did. The farmer who worked land that did not always cooperate, who lost harvests to weather and banks and market prices set by people who had never touched a plow, and who got up and worked again because the alternative was to stop being who they were. The immigrant communities that arrived in North American cities in the early 20th century to find that the promised opportunity came with conditions nobody mentioned. That the neighborhoods that they could afford were the ones nobody else wanted. That the jobs available were the dangerous ones, the dirty ones, the ones nobody with the options would take. And who built inside those conditions with those constraints? Churches and schools and mutual aid societies and neighborhood associations and savings clubs and cooperatives and every form of community institution that the market would not provide and government would not guarantee. Think about what those people were actually working with. No consumer protection, no workplace safety regulations worth enforcing, no social safety net in modern science, no unemployment insurance, no pension, no healthcare system, economic crisis that wiped out everything overnight, political systems that were openly captured by wealthy and the powerful in ways that were not even concealed, wars that took The working generation from families that needed them. Was the system designed for them? Was the math working in their favor? Was the playing field level? Was the rule making process fair and responsive to the people it was supposed to serve? No, none of it. The system was not designed for them. The math was not working. The rules were written by the people with the most gain from keeping them exactly as they were. And yet, they built families, they raised children, they formed marriages that lasted because when you have nothing, the people beside you are everything. They built communities that held when economies shook them because they had invested in relationships rather than just the finances. They built institutions, small, local, imperfect, theirs, that served their communities because no one else was going to do it. And here's the thing that I want you to sit with. When did they pass? What did they pass to their children? What is the inheritance that actually survived? Not primarily money. Most of them had very little money to pass. Not property. Much of it was lost, sold, seized, abandoned. What survived was what is still here, still operating, still shaping the lives of the people who descended from them, is a way of seeing. Framework for meeting difficulty, a set of values about what you owe to the people around you and what you can demand from the people beside you, and how you get through the hardest years without losing the most important things. That inheritance is the most durable thing one generation has ever passed to another. More durable than money, which can be lost in a decade of bad circumstances. More durable than property, which can be taken or sold or burned. The way of seeing survives everything. It travels through families and communities, stories told at the kitchen tables, and things demonstrated rather than explained. It is the only way of form of wealth that has reliably outlasted every economic crisis, every political failure, every system that was not designed to serve the people inside it. I want to ask you something difficult. What did people before you pass to you? Not just your parents or grandparents, the whole line of people whose decisions and struggles and choices made it possible for you to be here. Reading this, thinking about these questions, what did they give you that was not money? Because whatever it was, the work ethic, the faith, the stubbornness, the loyalty, the specific way of showing up when things are hard, this is your inheritance. That is what they fought to pass forward. And what do you do with it? And what do you add to it? And what do you pass to the generations after you? That is the questions this episode is really asking. So, what do we fight for? Not abstractly, specifically. I want to name 3 things that I believe are worth the full force of everything you have. I want to be specific about why each one of matters and what fighting for actually requires. The first is your family, your specific, actual, imperfect, irreplaceable family, not a ideal family you were promised in the cultural script, not the family that matches the social media highlight reel. Your family as it actually exists, the partner you chose or are choosing, the children you have or hope to have, to the parents and siblings who shaped you. This is the first line of the moral economy. Everything starts here. The Harvard Happiness Study said it clearly. A quality of your closest relationships is the strongest predictor of a long, healthy, meaningful life. Not income, not status, not achievement, relationships. And the most intimate, the most invested, the most demanding relationship most people will ever have is the one inside their family. That relationship requires the full version of you, not the exhausted, financial pressured, distracted, screen mandated version, the full version, present, engaged, genuinely there. Fighting for your family means making specific decisions that prioritize its health, even when economic pressure is pushing in the opposite direction. It means having the honest conversations about money, about what you both want, about the life you're actually trying to build together rather than the one you're drifting into. It means understanding that the financial stress in your relationship is not a money fight. It is a fear fight, a trap fight, a, a dream versus not numbers fight. And naming it accurately so you can address it at all right levels. It means being present in the moments that matter even when the hours are long. Because your children and your partner do not need financially successful version of you who is never there. They need you. The second is your values, the specific set of commitments about how to live, what to prioritize, what you owe to the people around you, and what you believe about the purpose of human life. These are not abstracts. They are daily decisions that accumulate into a life. How you treat the person who serves you coffee, whether you show up when someone you care about needs something and it is inconvenient, whether you keep your word when keeping it costs you something, whether you tell the truth when the comfortable answer is available, whether you live as if the people around you matter as much as you do. The system was described in episode 4: the lobbying machine, the regulatory capture, the media designed to keep you frightened and divided. That system specifically benefits from the people who are so pressured, so exhausted, so distracted that they do not have bandwidth to act on their values. A person who is working 60 hours a week and barely surviving financially does not have much capacity left for civic engagement, for community building, for the relationship institutions that hold a society together from the bottom up. The exhaustion is not an accident, it is a feature, and the response to it is not to work less. It is to be deliberate about where you direct what you have left. Values are not a luxury for when a math is comfortable. They are the foundation you build on when it is not. And the third is a community. Not only community, not the performance of connection through screens, actual, physical, local community. The people who live near you, work near you, worship near you, build near you. The relationships that exist in the same geographic space as your daily life and that accumulate into kind of social infrastructure that makes a neighborhood or town or a city actually livable. Community is a multiplier on everything else. The values you hold become more powerful than they are shared. The fight for your family becomes more survivable when there are people beside you going through the same thing. The battle for better policy becomes possible when organized people with the shared interests show up together rather than separately. And daily experience of economic pressure becomes more bearable. Research on this is ambiguous. When you are carrying inside a network of genuine relationships rather than alone, these three things Family, values, community are not separate. They reinforce each other. Strong family builds strong values. Strong values build genuine community. Strong community protects and supports families. And all three together produce the thing that no economic system can manufacture and no lobbying operation can buy. A life worth living. Not a perfect life, not a comfortable life, a meaningful one. I want to say something about values specifically that I think gets missed in most conversations about them. Values are not what you believe. They're what you do when it costs you something. Everybody believes in honesty until telling the truth is inconvenient. Everybody believes in loyalty until loyalty requires sacrifice. Everybody believes in showing up for the people around them until showing up conflicts with something easier or more comfortable. Values are only real at the point of friction. And the economic pressure your generation is carrying creates more friction than most, which means it is creating more opportunities to demonstrate values or to abandon them than more generations have faced. That is not a comfortable observation, but I think it is an honest one. The specific conditions of your life right now, the financial stress, the time pressure, the exhaustion, those are conditions under which you are actual values will be revealed, not the values you claim, the values you live. And the values you live are the values your children absorb without a single lesson being taught. They watch, they catalog, they carry into their own adult lives the specific picture of what a person does when things are hard. That picture is being drawn right now by how you respond to the pressure you are under. That is not a guilt argument. It is the most important argument for why the fight matters. You're not just building a life for yourself. You're demonstrating a life for the people who come after you. Every time you choose presence over performance, every time you choose honesty over convenience, every time you show up for someone in your community when it costs you something, every time you treat your marriage as the most important investment you're making rather than one more thing competing for your depleted attention. You're building inheritance. I want to push back on something that I think is one of the most damaging myths in North American culture inheritance. The myth of a self made individual. The idea that appropriate response to every difficulty is personal strength, personal discipline, personal responsibility. And that if you're struggling, the solution is to be a harder, stronger, more disciplined individual. There's truth in the personal responsibility. I'm not dismissing it. I have lived it. 5 jobs, 15 to 20 hours a day, 18 months, $48,000 in debt. And I know what personal responsibility looks like from the inside. It is real and it is necessary, but it is not sufficient. And the generation before us knew this in a way that a hyper individualized culture has largely forgotten. When the immigrant communities arrived in North American cities with nothing and the system was actively hostile to them, they did not respond primarily with the individual heroism. They responded with collective action. They built the institution the market would not provide. The mutual aid societies that pooled resources so that when one family faced a crisis, the whole community absorbed the shock. The savings clubs that allowed communities to accumulate capital collectively that none of them could accumulate individually. The credit unions that gave working people access to financial services on terms that serve the interests rather than shareholders' quarterly return. The unions that gave workers collective bargaining power that none of them had alone. None of these were charity. None of them were waiting for the government or market to solve the problem. They were organized, collective, self generated responses by people who understood something that individualism obscures, that the answer to the system designed to isolate you and extract from you is to refuse the isolation, to find the people around you who are carrying the same weight, to build something together that neither of you could build alone. Look at the communities in North America that have historically maintained economic stability and cultural resilience through the most difficult conditions. Almost universally, what distinguishes them is not that the individual members are harder workers or more disciplined savers. What distinguishes them is the density and quality of the community institutions, the churches, the cultural organizations, the mutual aid networks, the local businesses, the culture money with the community rather than extracting it out, the shared sense of obligation to the people around you that produces behavior the market never could. I think about the immigrant communities I grew up adjacent to, specific practice which is ancient and which exists in some form in virtually every immigrant tradition of pooling resources. When someone needed to start a business, the community funded it and expected repayment not to a bank, but because into the pool for the next person. When family hit the crisis, the community absorbed it, not because there was a program for it, because that is what the community did, because the social obligation was real and the relationships were real, and understanding that your well-being and your neighborhood is well-being where connected was real, that understanding that your individual flourishing is inseparable from flourishing of the people around you is the both ancient wisdom and the most practical response to the current economic reality. You cannot buy your way out of the broken housing market alone. You cannot lobby Congress or Parliament alone. You cannot build a social infrastructure your community needs alone. But together, organized, showing up, invested in each other, the historical record shows clearly that ordinary people have changed systems that seemed permanent and built alternatives to systems that seemed immovable. The answer was never individual, it was always community. The generation before us knew this. We have been taught to forget it. Part of reclaiming our agency is remembering. I do not want to leave this at the level of inspiration. I want to be specific because I think one of the ways people get stuck is that they agree with the argument. Yes, community matters. Yes, values matter. Yes, we should fight for these things. And then nothing changes because the argument never landed in a specific action. So let me tell you exactly what fighting for looks like. Not as a politician or policy consultant, as a working person who has done the hard version of this and found out what actually moves things. Fighting for your marriage looks like a specific conversation you may have been avoiding, the one about you both actually want, not what the financial reality currently allows, what you want, because the plan towards the life you want cannot be built while pretending the desire does not exist. It looks like deciding together that the relationships gets a specific, regular, protected investment of time and attention that the economic pressure is not allowed to consume. A vacation, a Tuesday evening, a walk, a dinner with the phone off. Something small enough to actually happen and regular enough to accumulate into something real. Fighting for your community looks like showing up somewhere physically on a regular basis. A church, a neighborhood association, a coach's position on your kid's sports team, a city council meeting, a credit union membership, a local businesses you chose deliberately over a chain. It looks like learning the names of the people who live near you and asking how they're doing in a way that expects a real answer. It looks like offering something specific to people around you before you need anything from them. Fighting for your local politics looks like attending one meeting. Just one to start. Your city council meeting, your school board meeting, the planning committee that approves or denies the zoning change that either allows or prevents the housing your community needs. These are the rooms where the decisions that the most directly affect your cost of living are made. They're public, they're accessible, and they're dramatically under attended by the people who would benefit most from decisions they produce. I think about the woman I mentioned in episode 4, the one who was furious about housing costs and started showing up to city council meetings. Not to perform outrage, to make specific argument about specific zoning rules. She came she came back meeting after meeting. She brought data. She brought neighbors. 2 years later, the block got rezoned. 40 families who can now live in the neighborhood they could not have access before. She did not fix the housing market. She changed the specific thing in one specific place. And 40 families' lives are different because of it. That is what fighting looks like, not the dramatic version, the patient, specific, show up and stay version. The version that most people do not attempt because it is not glamorous and because the results are not immediate. And because the culture we live in here, very little tolerance for effort that does not produce visible payoff within a news cycle. Fighting for your finances looks like two specific things that are within your control today. First, move your banking into credit union if you have not already. Credit unions are members owned. They're mandated to serve you, not shareholders. Their rates are often better, their fees are often lower, and every dollar you deposit invested in your community rather than extracted from it. This is not sacrifice. It is a better deal for you that also happens to serve a principle. Second, apply the time math to every significant financial decision you make. Not dollars, hours of your life. The decision that looks manageable in dollars often looks different in hours. The decision that looks expensive in dollars sometimes looks worth it in hours. Clearly, is the foundation of every financial decision that actually serves your values. And fighting for the larger system looks like the question from episode 4, applied consistently. Who benefits and who pays? Every policy, every political announcement, every media story, not as a cynical but as a discipline. The habit of asking these two questions consistently is a form of civic literacy that protects you from being managed, equips you to engage with the system more effectively. I want to bring generational argument home now because I think it's the most important question this entire 5 episode arc has been building toward. We talked about the generations that came before, the ones who arrived with nothing, who worked in conditions that would horrify us, who built communities and families and institutions inside a system that was designed against them, who passed forward not the primarily money, but the way of seeing, a framework for meeting difficulty, a set of values about the life is for and what you owe to the people around you. Think about what that required of them. It required knowing that effort they were making was not going to pay off primarily in their own lifetime. The mutual aid society they built was going to serve their children and grandchildren more than them. The union they organized was going to benefit the workers who came after. The credit union they started was going to matter into the institution that outlasted them by decades. They were making investments with a time horizon that extended beyond their own lives. They were building for people they had not met yet, for the generation that would inherit whatever they managed to create. That is the specific kind of thinking that individualism cannot produce. You do not sacrifice and organize and show up for decades for your own immediate benefit. You do it because you understand yourself as a part of something larger than yourself. A family, a community, a tradition, a chain of people passing something forward that matters. Now the question is yours. What are you passing forward? I do not mean this as a guilt question. I mean it as the most clarifying question available. Because when you ask it honestly, it cuts through an enormous amount of noise. It cuts through the anxiety about whether you have the right house or the right car or the right financial position. It cuts through the comparison trap, the exhausting measurement of your life against curated highlight reel of other people's best moments. It cuts through the political tribalism that keeps working people fighting each other instead of building anything together. When you ask what you are passing forward, the answer clarifies what actually matters. Not your net worth, not your career title, not the size of your home or the brand of your car. Whether the people who came after you inherit a stronger community or a weaker one. Whether they inherit a family that knew how to be present for each other under pressure or one that fractured when the math got hard. Whether they inherit a set of values that equips them to face difficulty with the dignity or set of strategies for avoiding difficulty that turns out to be impossible to avoid. I think about the people before us who built during the Depression, who built during the wars, who built during famines and displacements, economic upheavals that make the current housing crisis look manageable. They did not know whether their efforts were going to produce the outcome they were working toward. They did not have that certainty. What they had was the conviction that the building was the right thing to do, regardless of whether the system cooperated. That showing up for the people beside them was the right thing to do, regardless whether the institutions around them were functioning. That passing something worth having to the next generation was the right thing to do, regardless of whether they would live to see it received. That conviction is available to you. It does not require the math to work first. It does not require the system to be fixed first. It does not require perfect conditions a favorable political environment or housing market that cooperates. It requires a decision that is what you are doing. This is who you are. This is what you are passing forward. And then showing up for it every day with whatever you have. I want to add one more dimension to the generational argument before we move on, because I think it is easy to hear this and feel the weight of it as an obligation, as if the generation before you set a standard you are now obligated to meet. And I want to reframe that. What generations before you actually demonstrated is that human beings have enormous capacity to build and sustain meaningful lives under conditions that look from the outside like they should make meaningful life impossible. Not because they were superhuman, because they were human, fully, completely human, with the same fears and doubts and exhaustion and financial pressure and retaliation difficulty that you carry. The difference was not that their conditions were better. In most cases, they were worse. The difference was that they had a framework, usually coming from faith, from community, from cultural tradition, that gave them a reason to keep building even when the building was hard and outcome was uncertain. That the framework is what they pass forward, and it is available to you, not as a burden, as a resource, as the knowledge tested across generations of people who faced worse than you're facing. That it is possible to build something real and pass something worth having to the generation after you. Regardless of what economic system is doing around you while you do it. A close friend of mine has a daughter. I was saying this story. She was maybe 3 years old when he told me the story. He had come home from a long day, not a bad day, just long. And she was sitting at the kitchen table drawing something. She looked up, and when he walked in and held up the picture, it was not identifiable as anything, just colors and lines, the way the 3-year-old draws. But the look on her face when she was held up was the look of someone who had made something and wanted the person that they loved the most to see it. He sat down next to her and he told me that he started crying on the drive home from visiting me that same week. Not because he was sad, because he realized in that moment exactly what he was working toward and exactly what the financial pressure was putting at risk. Not his retirement account, not his career. That moment, the ability to be present and unhurried and fully there for the child who loves you without reservation. He said, I'm not working to afford the house. I'm working to afford that moment. That is what we are passing forward, not the house, the moment, the presence, the quality of the people we become for the people who need us. I want to tell you why this show is called Moral Economy Talk. Because I think after 5 episodes, it deserves to be said directly. The economy we talk about in newspapers and on television and the government reports, the GDP, the interest rates, the stock market, the housing price index, that is the financial economy. It is real, it matters. The broken math we described in episode 2 is real and has real consequences, and it deserves to be named and fought and changed. I'm not minimizing it, but there's another economy, one that does not show up in any government report, one that economists rarely study and politicians rarely discuss and media rarely covers. It is the economy of values, relationships, meaning, and community. The economy that is built not by financial transactions, by the specific quality of how people treat each other, ensure for each other, invest in each other, and pass something worth having into generations that follows. The economy is what this show is about. The moral economy. And here's what I believe about the relationship between the two. The financial economy produces the conditions in which people live, but the moral economy produces the people who live inside those conditions, and people produced by the strong moral economy, people with the genuine values, genuine community, genuine investment in something larger than themselves are the only people who have ever successfully changed the condition produced by a broken financial economy. Not the other way around. You cannot fix the financial economy first, then build the moral economy afterward. History does not work that way. The communities that changed the economic circumstances were communities that had already built something together worth protecting. The unions that won better wages were built by people who already had relationships and the values that made collective action possible. The political movements that changed economic architecture were built by people who already understood themselves as part of something larger than individual self interest. The moral economy is not what you build after the system gets fixed. It is what you build while you are fighting to fix the system. It is the foundation that makes the fight possible and the thing worth protecting that makes the fight worth having. And here's what I want to say clearly, because I think it is the most important thing the show has been building toward. The financial economy and moral economy are not equally vulnerable. The financial economy is fragile. It has crashed before. It will crash again. It responds to policy changes, to market conditions, to decisions of 12 people in a room in Washington. It can be disrupted by a single event in a way that wipes out decades of accumulation. The moral economy is harder to destroy. It lives in people rather than institutions. It travels through families and communities and stories rather than through balance sheets and investment portfolios. It has survived wars, depressions, famines, political upheavals, and collapse of every physical structure built around it. The church burns down and the congregation meets in the parking lot. The factory closes and the union hall becomes a food bank. The neighborhood changes and the community rebuilds itself in a new form because the relationships that constituted it are more durable than buildings that house them. This is why I am genuinely hopeful, not naively, not because I believe the system will fix itself or that people will benefit from it. Staying broken will suddenly develop a conscience. I am hopeful because the most important things, the relationships, the values, the community bonds, the specific human quality of showing up for each other, those are harder to take away than the financial security the system has been extracting for 50 years. You can price people out of a neighborhood. You cannot price them out of caring about each other. You can make housing unaffordable. You can make human connection unaffordable. You can capture the regulatory agencies and lobbying process and the media architecture. You cannot capture the kitchen table conversation between two people who are building life together and deciding what they're going to do about it. That is where moral economy lives, at that table, in your home, in your community, in specific daily decisions of millions of working people who are fighting, who are figuring out one conversation and one commitment at a time what they are actually building and who they are actually building it for. Across 5 episodes, we have documented what the broken financial economy is doing to the moral economy, the marriages, the family formation, the community bonds, the sense of identity and purpose that human beings need to function at their full capacity. We have named the mechanisms and traced the consequences and followed the money to the source. Now comes the part where you decide what to do about it, not in one grand gesture, in a daily accumulation of specific choices about what you prioritize, who you show up for, what you build for, and what you pass forward. That accumulation across millions of working people and their families and their communities is the only force that has ever reliably produced genuine changing conditions that working people live inside. That is moral economy, and you're already part of it. The question is whether you are building it consciously or letting it erode by default. Five episodes of honest diagnosis. Here's the most complete version of what you can do with it. Invest in your closest relationship more deliberately than you invest in anything else. The Harvard research is unambiguous. This is the highest return investment available to a human being. It does not require money. It requires presence, honesty, and a specific decision that treat your most important relationship exactly that. Build one real community connection, not a follow, not a like. One relationship with a person in your physical community that goes deeper than acknowledgement, a neighbor, a fellow parent, a co-worker, someone from your faith community, someone who knows your actual situation and whose actual situation you know. Start there. The research on resilience shows consistently that quality of your social connection predicts how well you navigate every other difficulty in your life. Show up once in your local politics, one meeting, one specific issue, 1 hour of your time directed at a decision making process that most directly affects the course of your daily life. If it produces nothing, you lose an hour. If it produces something, and then historical record says organized people showing up consistently produce something. You have participated in a mechanism that has always been available to ordinary people who chose to use it. Move your money 1 degree closer to your community, a credit union instead of a major bank, a local businesses once a week instead of a chain, a financial decision made with time at hours of your life, not dollars or weekend currency, so that you are spending from clearly rather than form of numbing abstraction of monthly payment. And carry this question with you from today. What are you passing forward? Not to pressure you, to orient you. Because when you know what you are building towards, the daily decisions become clearer and the daily difficulties become more survivable. The system is broken. That is true. The math is not working. That is documented and real. The people who benefit from it staying broken are organized and well funded and have been running the same place for decades. And none of that changes what is available to you, your family, your values, your community. Your specific irreplaceable presence in the lives of the people who need you. Your participation in institutions and relationships that either hold your community together or let it dissolve. Your vote, not just in the federal election, but in the local rooms where your cost of living is actually determined. Your economic choices, small and consistent, that either building community wealth or extract from it. The generations before you built with less, inside worse conditions, with fewer tools and less information and less protection and more explicit hostility from system around them. They built it anyway because alternative was to let the conditions determine the outcome. And they refused to do that. And what they passed forward, the values, the institutions, the way of meeting difficulty without being defeated by it. That inheritance is yours. Do not waste it waiting for math to get comfortable. Build with what you have. Show up for the people beside you. Pass forward something worth receiving. That is the moral economy. This is the fight worth having. And it starts with exactly the people listening to this right now. The field built for the marriages under pressure and the families trying to form and the communities trying to hold together inside an economic reality that keeps making all of it harder. You are not failing. The math changed. The culture shifted. The system was captured. And you still have agency in your home, in your community, in the specific daily decisions that accumulate into life worth having and legacy worth leaving. Starting next week, the show changes format. Solo arc is complete. Now, we're bringing in the voices that can extend this conversation in the ways I cannot do alone. Economists, faith leaders, people who study families and relationships professionally, political thinkers from both sides who are honest about what their side got wrong, and the real people who built something worth having inside conditions that were working against them. The conversation gets bigger from here. Subscribe to Moral Economy Talk so you do not miss what is coming. And if this arc gave you something, a framework, a language, a clarity about something you have been feeling but could not name, share it with one person who is the same weight, carrying the same weight. Not for the show, because they deserve to know they are not alone. Because the community we are trying to build starts exactly there, one conversation at a time. Because money shapes how we live, but values decide who we become. This is Moral Economy Talk, and I'm your host, Aleksandar Balta, and I will see you in the next episode.